Okay, thank you. Welcome to the La Plata Electric Association July board meeting. I'd like to go ahead and call the meeting to order. And as we do, please take a moment to stand and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Did I just blow that? 55 years of doing that. All right. Can we have a couple minor we have a couple of adjustments to the agenda before we go ahead and approve it. Can we get a Tim? Go ahead.
So yeah, there's a couple of agenda amendments I'd like to propose. One is Joe Wheeling, the chair of the board of FASTTRACK board, has asked to address the board in executive session to discuss a confidential business matter. I propose we amend the agenda to add Joe to the executive session. And then I'd like to also amend the agenda to add the review and possible approval of 3 recent engineering contracts with ESC, I forget the name of the full name of the company, after the executive session, but before the director and committee reports.
Great. Can we get a second on those modifications?
I'll second, Joe.
Terrific. Any discussion? Okay, all in favor of the amendment adjustments as proposed?
Aye.
Thank you. All opposed? All abstained? Terrific. This is the modifications to the agenda, and then we do a quick, do we have to approve the agenda or did that include it too?
No, so the way Tim moved to approve the agenda included both modifications.
Yeah.
So
okay, cool. Terrific. Okay. Great. Let's go ahead and open the floor for member comments and concerns.
And John, do you want me to read the member
Please
comment
do.
rules? Okay.
Yep.
The LPEA board encourages comments about the cooperative from its members. The board asks that each participant's comments pertain to cooperative business. Those wanting to address the board during the public comment period are granted 5 minutes to address their topics. Lengthy comments to the board should be submitted in writing. Formal complaints must be filed in writing and submitted in compliance with board policy. Comments from the public will be directed to the entire board and not any director individually. No personal attacks shall be allowed. Failure to follow these requirements may cause public comment period to be terminated. Copies of our policies and procedures are available on our website. Thank you.
Terrific. Okay. Anybody want to, do we have any member comments today? Nada? Okay. Then great, thank you. I'll go ahead and close member comments and move to the consent board items. Is there any items that any board member wants to pull out of the consent? Go ahead and let's hear it. Kohler, go ahead.
I'm just going to move to approve the consent board items.
Excellent, thank you. Do we have a second?
Second.
Great, Bob Lynch, thank you. Great, all. Holly, did you have a comment? You're on mute.
On the minutes, I did notice a typo. On page 4 of 106, at the very end of the last vote, Bob Lynch is both in the oppose and the favor of a vote.
Thanks for catching that,
He's a
Holly.
special guy.
Flexible. Thanks for catching that, Holly.
Okay, you want to modify that?
Yeah, we'll get that reviewed and taken care of.
Okay, so can we go, do you want to,
I think we can prove it contingent upon us, Janelle and I, verifying which direction Bob actually voted on that. We've got
Okay.
the video. That won't be hard to do.
terrific. Okay, all in favor of the consent board items? Put your hand up, say aye.
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 All opposed? All abstained? Terrific. Thank you so much for that. Let's move on to CEO and staff reports. CEO Jessica Matlock, floor is
Hey.
yours.
Thank you. Share my screen. Can everybody see that?
Yes.
Great. Okay. I will start out with some good pictures and then move on to key performance indicators. As we mentioned last month, the reliability section is probably going to be a monitoring performance for quite a while. And that's because we have had so many short outages due to lightning strikes. So Jerry, do you want to give any additional perspective on that?
Yeah, this last month, you saw the numbers ramp up quite a bit. The thunderstorms were a part of it, but the biggest factor was contributing factor was our member jobs and new construction has almost come to a standstill. And so what we have directed our focus on is maintenance. And we're really hitting our raptor protection of our primary dips. To do this, we have to take scheduled outages on our members. And I think we accomplished over 50 raptor protections this last month, and each one takes up to 50 members out of power at a time. And so that's why the scheduled planned outages were so high this month, is just really hitting maintenance hard.
Kirsten, did you have a question?
Yeah, I sure did, because I had asked about this. So it's interesting. So because I'd said we've got this money, let's do more maintenance, and doing more maintenance actually we create it's sort of a circuit here. It makes it more outages. So that's really helpful to know. When we look later on, as far as the other outages, I don't recall Raptors being too big a one. I know it's a huge one, so that we're required to do. But as you're looking at it, what other things can we be doing, or what other things do you have in your back pocket to do those things? Since keeping the lights on is our number one.
So the Raptors,
Jerry, so yeah, good.
it's all to improve reliability and and part of our fire mitigation as well. So this one has been on the top of the list to get all of our primary dips raptor protected.
So weather is the second biggest one, and so I know we do those reclosing things. That helps a lot with the quick weather hits.
Mm-hmm.
For my education, what other is there other maintenance that you've got kind of coming down the line to help us reduce our weather outages?
Yes, our tree trimming is by far the number one. And then our reject pole program, we've been focusing a lot on it as well. Poles, as they age, they begin to rot, and that number just it's always a race to stay ahead of that number so it doesn't get out of control. So we've been focusing a lot on that as well. Luckily, most of them we've been able to work hot and change out while the lines are still energized. So they haven't attributed to the increase in the numbers as much as the raptor protections have. Another thing that we have been doing, we have 4 capital projects going on. And each time that we do a capital project, when we cut over the members' services to the new lines that we've installed, that also attributes some outage time.
And
Thank
Kirsten,
you so much. I appreciate the details. Yeah.
you know, that's a good reminder that we are finishing up our fire mitigation and capital improvement plan. And we met with John Lee that was very informative for all of us because he gave us a lot of details about fire science. So we're finishing up that and we will have a presentation to the board on the fire mitigation plan this fall. Because I think to your point, there's a lot of great things and information in there that talk about both items that we're implementing from the capital work plan that directly tie to fire mitigation, but also reliability. So that will be coming this fall.
And Jerry, I'd also mention the proactive work that the drones are pulling up too. I think that those drone surveys are going to be a huge leap forward in what those are finding for us to be proactively addressing some of these issues.
Yeah, I agree, Dan. That has been one of the best things we've implemented this last year. Joe?
Yeah, Jerry, I'm not sure if I heard you correctly, but you said construction projects have come to a halt. Is that scheduled, or is that because there's nobody out there to do the work, or what was that?
We're really not sure why. We have over 100 jobs waiting for the members to call in and say, come do my job. But nobody has been calling in to release them to construction. We're not sure why. We don't know if it's due to shortages or inflation or what it is, but the jobs are there. People just aren't calling to kick them off.
And Joe, you're still on mute.
I get, so just so I understand, so people have said, I need this done at my house or my business, but they're not following up and saying I'm ready to go. I'm just not following you there, Jerry.
Yeah, they've paid the money. The jobs have been engineered and they've been staked by our staking group. The work orders are ready to be completed, but each time they get put into a queue and they don't get released to construction until the member calls and says, my trench is ready, everything's ready to go, I'm ready for you guys to come do the job.
Is that over 100 jobs? It sounds like it's a bit of a problem for you guys.
It's something that we are preparing for, because at some point they're all going to be released and it's probably going to be all on the same day. So, and
we're letting people know that the timing, because we're letting people know that it's even hard for us to get equipment. So we're being very clear up front that, you know, they need a plan several months ahead before they even start construction. So we make sure we even have the equipment.
Yeah, thanks.
Yep. John.
Well, certainly, as speaking as a member and a customer, LPEA came out. We had some modifications done to our house, and it was awesome. You guys were great, super responsive, super easy to work with, and everything went smoothly. So thank you for that on behalf of one member.
Good deal. We always like the positive feedback. Okay. Everything else is meeting or exceeding performance goals. So I will keep moving. June highlights. We're all very familiar with these fires that are popping up. The last one just yesterday, actually, Tim, thanks for the heads up, because sure enough, Jerry had been in contact on the Twin Buttes fire. It was not near any of our equipment, so we were not involved in that one. Couple things from mine that one thing I really wanted to highlight was the IBEW contract. You know, it was a very tough discussion this time because of inflation and what's happening with housing costs in our region. A lot of line workers are leaving groups like CORE to go down to make more money in Texas. So it's really creating that balance where we pay our employees appropriate according to market. Well, the market in our area has drastically increased. We hired NRECA and the Employers Council to conduct an analysis on our cost of living out here and wages. And so they gave us the ranges for our area, and sure enough, they're much higher than the most of the state. So we're now falling into, unfortunately, the ranges of Telluride and Aspen and Vail just with housing costs. But at the same time, we had to balance that with our budget and what we can afford. So I think we made some really good, well, I know we made some really good middle road with them, with the IBW. They passed it, the first vote, and we're on our way. And this bullet point was just talking about how we're working on contract details and starting the education on any changes. So we're pretty happy about that. And that's been completed. One thing I wanted to preview on community engagement, just because Rachel's brought this up before, we are going to host a kind of not beers and brats, but something similar in the Durango area and the Pagosa area in October. So Hillary is working on the details, but we thought it would be a good opportunity for us to use the example that Holy Cross does. They've been very successful where they do this and they go and they rent out a pub or a restaurant and they pay for, a soft drink or one drink, and then the board comes and it's kind of that meet and greet and discussion opportunity. So more to come on that this fall. Okay, moving on. Great news. We always like to see 0 accidents and incidents. I'm just trying to look at this. I think we kind of covered the thunderstorms. I'm sure all of you have seen that. And that's, operator challenge. So Garrett was going to address a little bit of information to that because Kirsten asked that question. Garrett?
Yeah, so the operator challenge, this is the first time we've tried this, but it's basically just a fun team building competition for the equipment operators. We had a few different events that they competed in. Mainly, this is kind of just, like I said, for fun, but also for bragging rights. Like one of the events was see who could dig the deepest hole with a mini excavator in 30 seconds. So we were just doing fun things like that. The winners received a little, it's a little collectible replica of a digger truck. So it was just fun little deal that we did. And I think it went well. The guys were cheering each other on and giving each other a hard time and stuff. So it was cool. We'll definitely do it again.
Thanks, Garrett.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks.
Okay. There's no questions. I'll keep moving. So I don't know about any of you, but I just got my LPEA's cashback program in the mail. So that was a big effort again, just to change the communications around that. I talked to Hillary this morning, not every year, because I went paperless. And so I got the paper and I was kind of wondering, but she said it was just this year that they'll do the paper just for the awareness communication campaign. And next year, when you go paperless, you won't get that. But I appreciated the how it looked. And so any feedback you all have on that you get from members and yourselves, please let us know. We'd love to hear. Rachel?
Yeah, I just love the reframe. It's so simple and understandable. And I think it'll finally clear up some of the muddlement. So really good job.
Great, thank you. Sunnyside. So I did want to kick it over to Dan just quickly on this because he's also going to preview for what's coming in August at the board meeting.
Yeah, thanks, Jessica. We did get a good response, especially in the environment that we're in with the solar markets. I was very impressed with the response that we got from our RFP, and we had it narrowed down to 3 people for the short list, all local vendors. And so it's exciting to see, some good local talent that popped up here and presented some stuff. Great ideas on how to help Fort Lewis accomplish their goals as well. And so we've been working through the grading on those 3. And we've had all 3 of them in for a personal interview, face-to-face interview in our office. Good stuff came with that. And so there was a little bit of refinement, another round of refinement that came with that to make things really apples to apples, to make sure that they were all proposing the same thing. And it's looking really good, and we're excited to bring the results of all this to you at the August board meeting.
Okay. We'll keep going. There's no questions.
Could I
Yes,
ask just
Tim.
a quick question of Dan there? So on the report, it says 4 and you just mentioned 3. So what was the final shortlist?
The short list was 3. We got 4 proposals back. 3 of the 4 companies, the 4 bids were from companies that have an operational presence in Durango. So the one that did not make the short list.
Perfect. Thanks, Dan.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So again, record rebates, which is great news. I think Kirsten had a question about that too. So Hillary was going to respond on that one.
Yeah, so the rebates are mentioned a couple of times in here. Once you'll see that here in the front, we're saying we have record rebates, which is the case. We've given 70% more this year at this time this year than as of the same time last year. But we are still under budget. So if you'll recall last year, we decided to really bump up our budget for rebates, specifically around heat pumps and ETS systems. I think those are heat pumps. That was our largest increase because we really wanted to be pushing that BE tech. So we set pretty aggressive targets there and are closing in on them. But we are record rebates because we increased the amounts of our rebates, but we also really increased our budget and are shooting for the stars there.
Yeah, and one thing just to Kohler, for your awareness, Dan Harms and I were we're at Tri-State on Monday meeting with a team there, but we also met up with Reg, and we just heard that they're potentially ending their rebate program, which is $2 million. And so they're moving it towards an on-bill financing, which we already provide. So that concerned us a bit. So it'd be great if anything you heard on that would be helpful, because we'd like to promote them to keep their rebate program.
Was that a total dissolution of the rebate or just certain rebate items?
Dan, he told us it was a $2 million budget for rebates that would go away. And so I'm not sure if that's their total rebate, but he did talk that it was associated with electric heat pumps. And that's very concerning.
Hillary, you want to Matt gave some feedback on that last night, right?
Yeah, so I had, after I heard that from you, Jessica, and also Dan, I sent Matt an email and he got back to us late last night, very late last night. You shouldn't have been on his email. But he said that they're looking at some significant tweaks to the rebate program, but it will not be going away in totality. I think they're more interested in really promoting the rebates for the products that return ROI and getting rid of the products that don't. So for example, probably Energy Star appliances, residential lighting, things like that. But the other thing that he said is that obviously their members are really important and they want to discuss their offerings with their membership to make sure it's not going to impact us negatively in any way. And they want to sit down with us in early August to discuss more.
Perfect.
It's still very preliminary at this point, so we're seeing where it goes.
Just a heads up, Kohler, for you.
Yeah, thank you, and I'll keep my ears open.
Thank you. Okay, the other really big item. Oh, Tim, did you have a question?
Yeah, thanks. About the rebates, I submitted for one of them in February for an electric chainsaw and got a credit on my bill, but I'm just wondering, it was good communication and then it just appears on the bill. I think there's an opportunity there to when that rebate is made or placed on the member's bill as a refund, a credit, to communicate that to the member. Here's your, it was approved and here it is, look for it on your bill. Because at first I was like, what? It was a long time, and I was wondering if I was going to get it or it was rejected or what. But lack of communication in that regard may be detrimental in a couple ways. And whereas if you do it, it's positive. You're reminding folks of what we're doing for them, and they're also getting confirmation of it. So just a suggestion.
Yeah, and Tim, I could not agree more. I think it's a huge missed opportunity. This is a good service that we in Tri-State are providing to our communities, and a lot of people, they don't even notice it on their bill. So they'll call like 2 to 3 months later and be like, "What happened to my rebate?" And it's like, "Well, it was on your March bill." So we're in a multi-phase process right now to improve our rebate process that started with the building of a total database, a singular database to capture all of those information. A secondary piece for that is sort of the member facing side. And then the tertiary piece of that is the automation of communication and billing around those programs. So in the future, what we hope to have is you submit, you get an automated email. We've received it. Thank you very much. You should hear from us the next number of weeks. And then when it's processed, we say, they get an automated email that says, "Thank you very much. And here's how much you got. And here's where you can see it. And hey, do you know about our other rebate programs?" So that's coming.
Good. Yeah, I think we should be shouting from the rooftops about what we're doing there. So thanks.
Good point. Thank you. Holly.
Just to go along with that, Hillary, wasn't one of the preferred communications from our membership by text? Because I know that like I get a text now when I get my election ballot mailed to me from the state, and I get one when it's processed, and that's really nice. I really like that. So, our membership likes texting, so maybe that would be a good avenue. And like Tim was discussing, it's a good opportunity for contact points with our membership. And I think that that's missing from that whole tri-state discussion too, if they get rid of that. So I'd also like to just mention that I've started reading the white papers for the microgrid strategy session next week. And I would like to just say that even after reading the first white paper, we are like, LPEA is doing really excellent work in this arena. And I'd like to offer kudos to Dan and Dominic for their presentation last week. And I'm still just like pretty much stunned at the amount of information that is coming out of that. And I'm glad somebody's got really good organizational skills, which I know is what CAMU basically helps provide. But kudos to the staff for the work on that and all around, because it looks like we are far ahead of the curve on that stuff. And I really do appreciate that.
Thanks, Holly. Yeah, I do have to mention that when I was with Dan in Denver on Monday and meeting with Reg, it was really fun to have Dan tell Reg what he needed to do in regards to this issue and the future opportunities, because that's the future of Tri-State, is actually acting as an aggregator of all this excess DER work, and then using that as battery storage so they can reduce their peak. Dan and I were actually in their control center when they almost hit peak. I don't know if they actually hit peak, but we were right there watching it. And we told Reg, we said, this is what you should focus on as a product for Tri-State in the future, aggregating this excess, the battery that we have. You can call us up and say, can you please, can we use your stored up energy in your battery to help shave our peak? Well, if you have enough of those around the Tri-State membership, you can actually make a measurable difference. So Reg is interested to hear more, but it was exciting to hear that we are leading in that effort. So thank you. Okay, one big thing too, which we always look towards, Carl, is the KRTA goal is met. So do you want to look at that one? That's tied to our carbon goal.
Yeah, so we state that we're trying to achieve all of these things with our carbon goal, but one of the caveat is we won't do it without being cheaper than 70% of our Colorado cooperative peers. So the KRTA report just came out, and I'm happy to inform you that we stayed at the same position in the state, which means we are meeting that goal. I will also let you know I've gone through, reviewed it, added some commentary and highlights, which Jessica signed off on. So we'll be sharing that with you before the end of the week, the full report.
Great, thanks, Carl. So that is just a preview that he'll be sending out the report. Okay. Moving on. So that's the end. One thing I did want to mention to the board also as a preview is that August will be busy. I'll just tell you that now, because Dan will be bringing the presentation on the solar installer that we would like to write a contract with. And then Drew and I, and probably our contractor, will be presenting the initial findings on our cyber report. So we did a cyber analysis of our internal operations. That is now complete. So that was phase one, where we will come back to the board in executive session to talk about the findings, and then phase two. So that's all coming in August. Okay. Any further questions on this? Kirsten.
Yeah, does that include questions in the appendix, or are we going to do?
Yep, that's fine.
Okay, so page 30 had a couple questions there. A brief explanation of the Microsoft Folina vulnerability, please.
Oh, the Microsoft vulnerability. I'm not sure we can talk about that in session.
Okay, so then, so when we can, let's do that. And then I'm interested for a little brief word or two about who Nash is that did the service rep training, and also what the results were as far as course assessment by the folks who went. A few more details on that would be helpful.
Sure. So Nash is the company that we hired when I first started. I had worked with them in the Northwest and brought them in to help with the Code of Excellence and conduct leadership training. So they've been with us from the very beginning. That's where we've learned about triangulation and how to effectively work together and communicate and provide feedback in a positive way. So each team tries to do a session potentially as a team building event. And so Hillary did that with her MSR team. So that's what that was about. It's just how to work together more effectively, how not to triangulate, let's not gossip here. How do we give feedback to each other and work in a more positive way? Does that help, Kirsten?
Yeah, were there any course evaluations? Did you guys send something out so that people who attended it could say, loved it, hated it, that kind of stuff? Be interested in.
Yes, they always do course evaluations, and that goes back to the trainer, and it's received always positively. That's why we stayed with this group. And that's our employees also wanted to stay with the group because they don't want flavor of the month. And so they said every past manager that came in brought their pet group and then didn't stick with it and just kept finding new trainers. And so we've committed to create sustainability on that point.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, good question. Rachel.
Yeah, I think one thing, just a kudos, was really cool. I was reading through the linked articles, and the Steamboat article about the shifting bylaw processes or something, and some independent individual energy consultant guy just kind of highlighted LPEA for kind of the leaders of transparency in the state. And I know that's something we worked really hard on for a long time, and in response to member concerns and comments. So just thought that was neat to see that. It's kind of seems like we're getting there, or kind of keeping the bar high. And then one question I had was similarly, just a little more detail. Jessica, saw that you met with Holy Cross to share best practices, and anything you kind of gleaned from that conversation.
A lot. Unfortunately, they have more flexibility than they do because of power supply. But I mean, they're getting ready to build a 300 megawatt solar facility with core. Maybe it's not 300, Dan, I can't remember what I told you, but, and they're also in joint work on wind development. So I think the biggest takeaway is just that, you know, they have the opportunity to partner with local co-ops to actually build large scale generation. And that's where co-ops are starting to go towards because of what's happening on the grid. They have a firm resource that they can control and manage. Also with any RTO coming, they are just preparing for any excess generation that they can develop, being able to put out on the grid and on the market. We don't have that opportunity because of being with Tri-State, but it's something that we continue to talk to Tri-State about. So I think in that regards, that's kind of the biggest takeaways. And again, we're doing similar projects to them. They wanted to know about our V2G bus, right? So I think they're very interested in that opportunity. They are doing a, I think it was a lease back program on battery storage, Rachel, which I think is we have been looking at that. Dominic's on that quite frequently. And so that's maybe something in the future we'll come back to the board to say, you know, maybe it is a good opportunity to go ahead and provide a lease back program for home battery storage, only if the member allows us to control the battery during the times we need it. But that's where we still need to work with Tri-State on these reserve issues that we have. Yeah, good question. Tim?
So the outages, I just want to confirm. So something like the Bear Dance fire is a MED, is that correct? So it doesn't fit into these categories of cause without MED, is my understanding correct?
And let me clarify what MED is again. Once again, it's not, it can't be defined as a certain length of outage or a certain number of customers. It's sort of like a standard deviation, you know. And so what maybe was a MED today could not be an MED tomorrow if we have huger outages that come in after that. So things can move around a little bit, is my understanding on that. But if it is really major, I would have to look. We'd have to look and see if that got categorized as MED or not. Jerry, you might know off the top of your head if it was MED.
That one did fall into
Okay.
The MED category.
All right, so the cause category without MED doesn't include the Bear Dance fire.
Correct.
And it's just the yellow bar in the previous graph.
In this one?
Yeah, well, what you just had up. Yeah, so
Right
I think,
here.
yeah, that yellow.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's with the MED event. So the Bear Dance fire, Jerry, was in the MED on here.
That's correct.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Yeah, I appreciate that explanation. It's always a little case by case, so it's sometimes hard to figure out. You know, I just go back from a member standpoint. Somebody didn't have their electricity, however we categorize it. You know, so.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks.
Thank you, Tim. Kohler.
Yeah, I'm thinking back at the conversation I had with Reg last month, and I want to thank you and Dan for kind of helping him out. You know, my vision is that what Reg is trying to do is a big scale of what LPEA is already trying to do.
Mm-hmm.
I think we're actually ahead of Tri-State, and they are really doing it. But as I mentioned last month, this is a cultural shift with Tri-State. And Reg just told me he has a lot of pushback from other directors and other co-ops. So I really appreciate you guys helping him out. I think he needs that positive push and some guidance, because he definitely gets it from the other side. So thank you, and keep it up. And like I said, I'll keep my ears open. I'm going to talk to him some more since you brought this up, and see what we can do on this, because I think it's a benefit for everybody. It's just not seen that way at this point.
Mm-hmm. Thanks,
So
Kohler. Appreciate that. Yeah, we've offered to Reg to be a pilot for him as well. So I did want to circle back real fast to Kirsten's question, because Drew texted me to say that he can talk about the Microsoft vulnerability in public session. So Drew, do you want to answer that?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. So the Helena vulnerability it's a 0-day flaw with Microsoft, meaning they didn't have a fix for it. And so what happens is an attacker could send a Word document that under the hood calls this Microsoft support diagnostic tool that's on all Windows computers. And that tool can then launch an executable file. So that could be something malicious. And so until they have a fix, what we did was just completely disabled that Microsoft support diagnostic tool. We don't use it in our system. And so, it didn't cause us any impact to disable that functionality. And in fact, since we don't use it, we will probably just leave it disabled so that we're safe from future attacks using that method. So.
Thanks, Drew. Kirsten, did you have a question on that?
Yeah, thanks for thanks for explaining that. So would you suggest that all of us who happen to have Microsoft maybe disable that? This is beyond an LPA. This is just me asking you as a tech guy.
Yeah, I mean, you can. There's ways that you can do it manually. But honestly, the best thing to do on a personal level is just be careful with attachments that you receive and apply updates to your computer. So I think they are really close, if not already deploying an update that will protect your computer. So.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yep.
So before I move on to Carl, I did want to mention one more thing. Since we talked about the capital credits and the amount of communication, I just want to thank Hillary because we've had so many customers comment on our outage texts and emails after the fact that come out. I've never seen that in anywhere I've ever worked, where the utility actually sends out an after action email. And one thing that I've also never met anybody that has done this, because it's painful, is that Hillary will respond to every comment that comes to her. So we have a lot of members that still negatively email her about an outage, and she actually takes the time to email every single person and reach back out and ask how we could improve. Again, I've never seen that before, and just wanted to thank Hillary for going that extra mile, because I think that's huge. So just want to put that out there. Okay, if there's no other questions, I'll have Carl kick off the finance report.
Thanks, Jessica. I will just share my screen. Great. So let's get right into it. Lots of green ticks again. So the real highlight from June is very strong sales. We were significantly over our forecast for both kilowatt hours and revenue, driven very much by the industrial load. Dan had mentioned that he anticipated it being significantly higher in June if they carried on as they were, which they have. And I think from what we've seen, Dan, that July won't be that different from what we know so far. Would that be a fair comment?
Yes, things still appear to be up and running.
Excellent. So we were significantly over budget on our operating margin, but I had mentioned last month that I thought expenses would be closer to where we had budgeted, which did happen, although we were still under budget on our expenses, mainly due to the biggest line item impact in that was the legal expenses that we budgeted pretty high just because we didn't want to get caught out this year and by not having enough. On these metrics, equity percentage you will see come down next month, as in June there was a few capital credit retirements went out, but by no means the majority of them. Most of them will be in July. There was a handful in June. So that number will be coming down closer to the 50. I know we did change the range, but it is going to be coming down. Cash is in pretty good shape right now. It's obviously within the new range at the end of June and will be in July, although it's going to be lower once again due to the capital credit retirements. Okay, so this one we only look at the end of quarters. We just have a summary of where our operating margin is compared to budget. So we had anticipated a loss in the second quarter. Those strong sales, especially the industrials, have kind of flipped that round. So we have a fairly small but positive operating margin in Q2. Q3, I would imagine, will look somewhat similar, but that's what we have budgeted. So we are tracking towards being over budget in terms of our margin, and I think that will continue while we see these strong sales. So let's look at some of the highlights. As I mentioned, costs were below forecast by about 136,000. Around 100 of that was the legal costs. Rebates is another one we've mentioned. As Hillary said, we really shot for the moon and we're kind of orbiting, but we're not quite there. Labor costs were within 0.5% of what we forecast in terms of what we expensed. We were actually slightly over on capitalized labor, but that was what we expected due to the new union contract, which was slightly higher in some areas than we had forecast, and those areas are the ones that are more often capitalized. So if that makes sense. Delinquent accounts very, very low. Again, we see there this electric sales kilowatt hours. I think we had months and months where that was orange, but it's been green lately, and significantly green. If I had a brighter green, I would use it. As 10% above forecast is quite something. So that gave us that gross margin, which was $300,000 over forecast, with operating margins approaching $500,000 over what we had forecast. So in terms of margins, very strong, very robust, but I would say, and this isn't like damage limitation, it's, I think our forecasting was pretty tight. I just don't think anyone could have anticipated what's happening with those industrial sales. I think, Dan, we looked at June, and we felt we had over budgeted in 2021, but the 2022 actuals are actually larger than what we budgeted for 21, if that makes sense. So we pulled down our 22 budget to kind of be more similar to what actually happened in 21, and 22 has just shot through it. It's been significantly higher.
But Carl, on that point, Dan, I'd ask you this with the industrials. I mean, this is not a normal situation that we're not going to see sustained. Is that correct?
Yeah, you never know. And in fact, I may have spoken too soon when I said they're up and running. I just checked again, and it's still up there, not as high as it was. It backed off about half of it. And that's the key thing is with the industrials, just it's at the whim of the market conditions. Things come and go at a blink of an eye. And that's why we come not to rely on those loads to provide heavy margins for us. And so those are more cost-based type of rates, very cost-based rates. And if it's there, that's great. If it's not going to hurt us too bad.
Yeah, and Carl, wouldn't you also say that in regards to, because now we're moving heavily towards maintenance programs instead of capital programs, we're going to see higher costs in that regard for labor costs?
I would expect so. July O&M looks to be tracking slightly over what we had forecast. So yes, that makes perfect sense.
So, and all that's saying is that our gross margin, even though it's 300K above forecast, these next 6 months, you're going to see that degrade pretty quickly because we are hitting this maintenance program so hard and a couple other contract work that we have. Is that right?
Yeah, I would expect expenses to be, the legal one is kind of an outlier, but everything else will be tight or above forecast, especially in Q3. The real what will be the decider on whether we're below our bottom line is sales. And as Dan has kind of indicated, they may be coming down, but I think we thought that before and they didn't. So we'll keep our eye on that.
It's like Joe had a question.
Yeah, somewhat related. What Jerry was talking about later, all those jobs that are kind of sitting in the hopper. And I have no idea how much those are worth, but does something like that have a potential to really blow up, what we're doing here? And does that need to be, we need to take a look at that and say, hey, folks, if you put in for a job, I don't know, within 3 months or something, we've got to start working on this to be able to maintain budget and workflow and stuff like that, if that makes sense.
Financially, and especially in terms of looking at statements, not really, Joe, because the guys who will do the work, we're paying them whatever. There may be overtime, but that's, especially if you compare it to something like power supply, it's really not a lot of money. Most of the equipment and supplies that are needed, we've already paid for. It's really, I think the challenge lies more on Jerry's side with scheduling and just making sure he's juggling his resources. But for me, I may see a skew more towards capitalized than expensed. But really, my main priority is making sure we've got the cash that we need, and we're paying those expenses anyway.
No, I'll also add that our line extension policy is very much a growth pays its own way type of
That's
policy.
true too.
So
yeah.
If we have jobs come in, the customers are primarily paying for those extensions. So like Carl said, it's not a financial hit to us.
Kirsten?
Yeah, and Joe, I know over here in Pagosa, a lot of the big projects are having trouble finding workers. So there's a delay in construction projects, and that's going to be a delay of when the electricity is going to be called for too. So it's all a domino effect.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, if anyone in either of the bigger counties that we are in is doing any construction work, and I know Dan can speak to this, it's not happening at the schedule that you had hoped, on the schedule that you had hoped. Any other questions? Kirsten, you still had your hand up. Is that just you hadn't put it down, or you got another question? Okay. All right. Thank you very much. Thanks, John.
Excellent. All right. Doing good as usual. Thank you for that, Carl. Okay, we are slightly ahead of schedule. So in light of trying to keep things moving along, why don't we skip down and do some of section 8 until we hit the 10:15 mark. We'll take the break and then we'll bring Matt on. Does that sound good to everybody? Okay, cool. All right, so section 8, reports. Let's start with you, Graham.
Thanks, everyone. I can refer to my submitted written attorney report. I would say that just the litigation matter that I'd sort of passed on, if you have questions related to that, if we could address that in executive session, just because it's sort of a pending matter for attorney-client privilege and work product reasons. But otherwise, if you have any questions, just open up for questions.
Give everybody an extra few moments here while they just we're moving stuff around. Pull up the report. Go ahead, Rachel.
Yeah, just to flag it for executive session, I did have one question on that litigation matter. It was just a point of clarification, but if we could address that.
Sure.
That'd be great.
Absolutely.
Yeah, if you need a volunteer, I'll do it for the RDC. Anybody have any questions on the rate design committee? Or Tim, was that how you can't hear me?
Got you.
I
Kristen,
couldn't hear what you said, Kirsten. I don't know.
Oh, I think John was looking for volunteers to do reports, and I was saying, I'll field any questions on the rate design committee.
Oh.
Report.
No, let's just go down. We'll go down. Let's just stay on the sequence. I wasn't asking for volunteers. We'll call on everybody, give everybody who is reporting to give a chance. So if you're done, Graham. Good.
I don't have anything to add if anybody doesn't have any questions.
Terrific. Okay, Roundup. Any talk track on Roundup?
There's a bunch of stuff in the packet, as you can see. And I think big highlights, Hillary sent out that press release, just noting it's been a busy quarter for the Roundup board, which has been distributing significant funds and really working on drawing down our reserves, kind of on the principle that, these are for the community to be spent. And so, and I think there was some direction from the board to that point last year. So I think that said, as we've continued to dip into our reserves, we're getting to a point where conversation has come up again about what's the best strategy for how to kind of use the remainder of those reserves. That coupled with, I think, some conversation around our SEEK commitment and financial contributions in general is kind of leading us into a more strategic conversation about how we're allocating funds within Roundup. And let's see, I think I included just a little bit of additional information about SEEK this go round for those of you that haven't served on the Roundup board, just because it's a fascinating component of really impactful component of the work that the Roundup Foundation and LPEA are doing to support our community. And as you can see in the little explanation, it's this really one of a kind, or the only thing that I know of in this community that is a stopgap measure to provide one-time payments for folks in crisis so that they don't lose their housing and or their job. And I think in our community in particular, reflecting on some of the things Jessica mentioned regarding housing costs, et cetera, this has become an even more critical resource that we have. And I think one of the things that's also just so impressive about SEEK is how this one-time funding, again, it's for folks that maybe they got sick, so they're in crisis and they just didn't make the rent payment and they're facing eviction. But it really impacts people's lives and abilities to just kind of persist and continue, and then also better their lives. I was really impressed in the report we got from the SEEK group about how many folks that were helped through this process were able to remain stably housed, and then even more so folks that made other changes in their lives. Like 84% of people who went through this process, they get counseling and referral, made changes to their budgets to better align with income. So super cool thing that we as LPA folk are supporting. And again, I think something we'll be looking at potentially shifting additional funds to. So any questions on Roundup?
Cool. Thank you. All right, Tri-State.
Thank you. The reports here, I want to bring out a couple of things I'd like to highlight in the reports. The big one is the NERC 2022 Summer Liability Assessment. I put a link in my report inside the Tri-State report, as well as I put the PDF in our drive on this assessment. Pretty much what this assessment is doing is saying that west of the Mississippi, there's elevated risk. And I think my big takeaway from looking through this assessment is that I had a very narrow vision on resource adequacy, and mine was kind of focused on generation. But what this report brings out is not just generation, it's also transmission. Lack of or vulnerability of the transmission we have. It goes into the supply chain, and with the supply chain, you're talking about fuel for generation, labor for people to do things, as well as materials, transformers, solar panels, these type of things. And then it also talks about cybersecurity. And that's something I hadn't focused on as far as resource adequacy, but it is, because there's a lot of vulnerabilities there. They know that Russia is trying to take down the grid, and they've got proof of this, and they're working on that. So that's an assessment. If you get a chance, it's a pretty involved assessment. It takes a lot of time to sit there and read it and try to absorb it. There's another one that I put into the drive, and this is a tri-state presentation. And this one is called the Supply Chain Services Inflation Presentation. And it was done by Ashley Perkins, an employee at Tri-State. And that gives you what the current effect of some of this stuff is on Tri-State. And I listened to Carl with his financial stuff. I'm pretty jealous as far as from a Tri-State point of view, because it's not that same picture there. And it shows you the impact of supply and pricing and delivery. And to give you an example on the transformers right now, and these transformers go from $2 million on up. The delivery date is 152 weeks. They can't get a price until the day they deliver it to them. None of them are made in the United States. The delivery charges have gone up well over, I think it was 400% to get these delivery with shipping and stuff. And so I would look at that report. That one is fairly easy to get through. It also shows what Tri-State is doing right now and what they think the near future has, if there is some relief on the horizon. If that happens or not, I'm not 100% sure that would be. But if you take those two reports, and then I think what's anticipated with the white paper that Holly mentioned that CREA is going to put out, I think you're going to get a feel that this is really going to impact our members as well. It's coming down that way. We haven't seen it with our energy charge from Tri-State because they're locked into a price. I tell you, it's tough on Tri-State not to increase rates. They're in a financial hurt at the moment. So that's what I would highlight there. Take a look at that. I can see there's a couple of questions. So I'll go ahead and just ask Rachel. You want to ask a question?
Sure, thanks, Kohler. Thanks for including those reports. The NERC one was really fascinating. So a couple of questions on the Tri-State situation. I saw that Ken Rife's retiring. Have they identified the new legal counsel?
They have not. They're working on that, and his retirement date is October 1st. And so that's a period of time to bring someone forward.
Great. And then there was, oh, sorry.
No, go ahead. I thought you were done.
Oh, no, just got a couple tucked in here. So on page 81, there's the SPP RTO reliably serves new peak load, which I thought was a really cool thing to see, especially after reading that NERC report. But one of the things I just wanted to better understand, so in one of the paragraphs it says demand response contributed 1.1 megawatts to the fuel mix. And so I thought demand response was more that people are shifting. It's not the actual contribution of fuel, right? Isn't it just shifting of shifting of use?
I think shifting the use and shifting of generation resources. And that question was also asked by Kirsten. So let me tell you, let me read her question first and give you the answer that Tri-State sent me, because I think this is a little bit helpful as well. So what Kirsten asked is on the board report, page 4, SPP RTO reliability services new peak load. The last sentence in the thing, demand response contributed 1.1 megawatts to the fuel mix. Is this contribution good, average, or disappointing? And the answer, and I got this from Barry at Tri-State, it's average, but a bit more complex. SPP likely didn't call on much demand response. Demand response is usually available for limited durations, so most of it would likely be held back until either prices were very high or the balancing authority got into energy emergency alert. So it sounds from that they actually hold back and save that for more of an emergency than anything else. And I'm new to this as well. When I saw it, I thought one megawatt, that's pretty minimal compared to all the other figures they're using. So
Kohler, I can
that's
put
the
a little
answer
bit,
I have.
put a little bit of color on that. What Tri-State is also doing is creating interruptible load contracts. And so especially like with these data centers that can be easily interrupted, that's probably the only tool they have in their toolbox right now is, hey, something's getting really expensive. I can call on this interruptible load, 40 hours out of the year. Let's use one of those hours right now. We're trying to get them to think bigger and better than this. I mean, LPEA alone has 15 megawatts of controllable load, relative to the 1.5 they're just talking about. So.
Yeah, and I would think that SPP has even much greater than what Tri-State does. So you're right.
Huh. Interesting. And then, thank you. One quick final question, and this is probably a Dan question also. So I'm reading through the NERC report. It talked about how it was distributed energy solar tripping or something like that. This is an issue at a larger grid scale, and I didn't quite understand what that meant. I don't know if you have any more information on that.
Kohler, were you about to say something there,
No, go ahead, Dan.
It's essentially the way a lot of the inverters and everything, this is all inverter-based generation. And when there is a disturbance on the grid, they are by default programmed to cut off until the disturbance goes away and then come back on. And it's called like ride through. They aren't necessarily configured to ride through a disturbance. And so you lose that. Well, that's sort of becoming very important generation that needs to be there to support the grid. There's technologies to get around that. Hawaii's already done a lot of stuff on this to reconfigure inverters to hold in there longer. And so I think it's just something that the industry needs to catch up to and get there on that.
Thank you, Dan. Holly?
Before I launch into this, are we supposed to do something at 10:15?
Take a break.
Oh, okay.
So
all right. Is that a go ahead and launch then, sir, or take a break?
how big's your launch?
Well, it's kind of a mixed bag, to tell you the honest truth, because I just want to talk for a moment about Kohler talking about the cultural shift that has to go on in order to really implement their energy as a service plan, because this is something that I have been really grappling with myself as I'm trying to formulate how to approach the question of resource adequacy at this upcoming CREA meeting. And so I just want to point that out, because I think that is probably the single biggest impediment to the success of this launch of this energy as a service program. And so I just also wanted to point out something from the microgrid white paper. And I don't know if Dan has had a chance to look at this, but what the Department of Energy is projecting is that distributed energy resources are expected to rise to an installed capacity of 387 gigawatts by 2025. And that may be about 30% of the total capacity of the United States energy draw. And further still by 2031, when 10 years from now, it is conceivable that in some regions, DERs could approach 50% of generation. So this morning I started looking at the numbers. Okay, so how many gigawatts does the United States use, right? And I found, according to the Energy Information Association, that the United States produces 1,176,729 megawatts. Okay, so there's 1,000 megawatts in a gigawatt. So I ran that math. So we've used roughly 1,143.8 gigawatts annually. So 30%, 387% is, or 387 gigawatts is that 30%. They're projecting by 2025 getting to that point, right? And so it also says some regions, and that's what I'm really kind of afraid of, is right now there is such a divergence in opinion in just even the CREA board and managers about what constitutes resource adequacy and what doesn't. So that's like the thing that I am grappling with the most, is how can we like really support this energy as a service from Tri-State, because that is the wave of the future. And that's why I keep coming back to how awesome and how lucky and like how like needed the work that LPEA is doing right now because of that.
Hey, Holly.
So,
oh, I don't mean to interrupt. I was just going to say, I am totally with you. And, you know, we've got a big lift at the upcoming CREA meeting. Would it help if you, Dan, and I would sit down and go through this? Because even when Dan and I were at Tri-State on Monday, we were with Crossover. We talked a lot about resource adequacy, because there's going to be requirements that are just going to hit us. So we don't have to make up resource adequacy, and we don't have to define it. It's actually already defined for us. And I think where CREA is coming is they're just saying, do we want to oppose mandatory resource adequacy, or should we support it? Well, everybody should just support it. But Dan and I are happy to meet with you before the session to walk through everything. And then we can report back to the board on what kind of the position is, because it does seem amorphous and big. But at the end of the day, we're going to the RTO SPP market already. They already have resource adequacy. We're going with Crossover. They have requirements. And so we can walk through those with you so that we can get ready for the CREA board. It's just a thing I'm throwing out there for you.
I absolutely do appreciate that. I think we also need to include probably Kohler and maybe Kirsten in that discussion, because, you know, many of us have kind of some insight into how some of these other folks think. And that's what I'm saying, is this is a cultural shift. And yes, I am supportive of everything that LPEA is doing, but it's cooperation among cooperatives, because we do have a large segment of the population who feel like they're left out. They don't have the resources, they don't have the intellectual, capacities, I guess I could say. And so, I mean, is it incumbent upon us just to look out for ourselves, or how do we help, you know? I mean, like you said, you took some delight in having Dan tell Reg what he needed to do. There's a reason for that. And so how can we like mitigate risk to not only ourselves, but also to the entire system, because it is increasingly globalized and we are not in a vacuum.
Sure. Yeah, no, you're right. Yeah, I'm happy to set that up with whoever actually wants to participate, if that would work.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
You bet.
Thank you. Kirsten, I want to make sure that you have time and you're not rushed. Do you want to take your question now, or you want to put a pin in this and reserve it? We have to start at 10:30 with Matt. You're on mute. Go ahead. You broke up there.
Put a pen in it.
Copy that. Okay. We will pick this up later. You have 10 minutes. We'll see you back here at 10:30. Okay, we're going to go ahead. Sorry, Kirsten, just to be clear, we're going to table your question till we resume the director reports in their natural sequence. Matt doesn't have a lot of time, so we need to go right to him. Is that work for you?
Right.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Matt, the floor is yours. Go ahead.
Thanks, John, and nice to see all of you. Have a very brief public update, and then to the extent we're going into executive session, we could certainly go into kind of some next steps for a few minutes. But sort of two big developments. Take the small one first, big one second. Small one is that in the reserved issues case, which involves the assignment of transmission costs to kind of direct the Tri-State Rate Design Committee as that moves forward. Exceptions were filed at FERC by a number of parties, including NRECA, who came in to try to support differentiated treatment, essentially for Tri-State under the Federal Power Act. Exceptions were filed on all four of the issues. As you'll recall, reserved issue 2 and reserved issue 4 were really our big items. I think the decision is really well done. And we'll have to see if FERC as a whole ends up granting any of those exceptions. For the public, exceptions are like an administrative appeal. So it's a challenge to the judge's decision that goes up to the full body of FERC commissioners. So that'll be moving forward. We did file a response to those exceptions on Monday. So that's now fully briefed and in front of FERC. So that is the reserved issues piece of this. On the partial buy down, the judge has issued a report to the full FERC, laying out the full set of circumstances involved in the opposition to the settlement, as well as the support for the settlement. Judge Nagel went through a really extensive discussion of everything that had transpired over the course of this case, and how the settling parties had arrived at the BDP figures that were developed as a part of the black box that everybody had agreed to. So that's a big development for her to advance that. Certainly reads like the judge is trying to move this along and get this up to the full commission. So the next step will be the full commission will issue a decision on that. There's not a specific timeline that they have to do that on. Traditionally, they do this, within 60 days or so. They can stretch on longer for complicated cases, but I think ultimately what it's going to come down to for FERC as the commissioners is, whether they want to let United Power's opposition to the BDP override the broad base of support and the structure that it creates for numerous members to be able to move forward with a partial requirements contract. So that is the update. Happy to take any questions, or we can go into executive session for a little bit more detailed conversation. Joe, looks like you had a question.
Yeah, first thing on the reserve case. Mm-hmm. So in our ECA's motions, I'm assuming we're not viewing those favorably.
Yeah, essentially what NRECA was arguing for was that because of Tri-State's business model as a generation and transmission association, that they should be treated differently from a rate-making perspective, cost causation perspective. We did respond to that in our pleading to state that there's no basis under the law for that differentiation.
Okay. And the second question on the do we have any, I read part of that report, and it just seems like this thing could go on forever. Do we have any, like through our congressional representatives or any way to get this moved up? I mean, at some point we're going to be sideways with crossover, I think, with what's going on. And I'm just really worried about how long this is getting pushed out and pushed out and pushed out. And it seems like we should be able to do something to say, hey, we need a decision on this, given all the economic, everything's going on economically in the world and in our backyard.
Yeah, and we've made the case through our pleading. So when that goes up, the judge's report as well as the full record goes up. So our previous filings will go up to the full commission as well for the staff to review. Reaching out to elected officials to emphasize the importance of this is certainly something that any citizen can do. And there's, that's a perfectly appropriate thing. But they will, the timing case has been made to FERC. And I think that, this case has been stretched on for a long time. And I think they'll recognize that it spent a lot of time in the settlement process, and that there was actually a settlement that came out the other side of that with really only one steadfast piece of opposition to it. And we made, several filings stating some of the issues that we thought deficiencies that were there in that opposition, as did Tri-State.
Does it help at all? I mean, to have, San Miguel and Pooter and us and, submit kind of a joint letter signed by all the directors to say, hey, look, we're ready to get this going. I mean, it seems like we should be doing something besides, you just having to go look at the filings and report to us. It seems like we should be able to take something to try to put a little pressure on someone to move this along.
So Matt, I think we need to move this to executive session, this part of it. Okay. Joe, we have some comments that we'll make, but it needs to be an executive session on that point.
Tim.
Yeah, Matt, just for the purposes of members and the public and so forth. So how typical is it that a settlement like this gets contested and moved to the full commission? And is there anything typical around how they treat and come to a decision on this? Does it suggest a leaning one way or another?
I think the fact that the report from the ALJ was so robust, because it was very extensive, to lay it out. And I think what Judge Nagel was trying to do there was to be able to comprehensively lay out the entirety of the positions so that it would be easily digestible and to be able to speed up the decision. FERC does approve contested settlements. It's not outside the realm of possibility. There's 4 different ways that they can do that. We made a case for all 4 of what we call the trailblazer approaches in our respective filings as to why it was appropriate to do that. So hopefully, given how robust the report is, that will speed up the consideration of it by FERC. But like I said, there is no specific timing on it.
Right. And my question was more about, is past performance of these kinds of things an indicator of future performance? And if that past performance was the full commission doesn't normally or does normally rule for the settlement versus against it, I guess is my question. Context, I don't have any context for how these things are treated at the FERC, and is it relevant, I guess is my question.
Yeah, I'm not sure that the past consideration of these types of agreements is relevant. This situation with a fully regulated G&T and the kind of, member dialogue that's gone on with regard to their policies as, you stand up a full regulatory structure around Tri-State is new, right? But I think at the end of the day, what's important is there's a really broad set of support for this settlement agreement. There's really one party that does not support the settlement agreement. And I think that will, that can help to move this along. But, predicting what a regulatory agency is going to do is challenging. If I could do that, I'd probably be doing something else.
All right, thank you.
Rachel.
Sorry, you mentioned this in your earlier statement, and I know we've talked about it in the past, but I'm not sure if it's the same process or if I'm conflating things. Did you say that typically the commission will rule within 60 days?
Yeah, that's a rough timeline, but there's no statutory deadline or anything like that within which they have to rule. Traditionally they do consider settlements fairly quickly, and they'll recognize the fact that this one has time sensitivity to it. Others, the open access transmission tariff settlement, for example, did drag on for a period of time. But I also think that issue and the issues that were in that settlement are more complicated than the issues that are here. This is a big public policy case for them. And I think ultimately it's going to come down to whether they view a connection between this and the full buyout case in a way that they want to wait, but it's hard to say how they'll consider it.
Okay. Absent, last call for questions or comments in the public forum. Okay, let's go ahead and if somebody wants to make a motion, let's get into executive session.
I move that we head into executive session to continue discussing legal matters. I think we have one issue within our own local litigation, and then also information on FASTTRACK communications.
And we have an employee update.
An employee update.
Okay.
And John, one thing, Cole, if we're just going to talk about the BDP, then Kohler can participate. If there's questions about the reserved issues, then we're going to need to segment it so that Kohler's not participating.
So bring them in out of the gate and then kick them out if we need to.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's the right way to go. If there's a reserved issues question, we'll punt it and we can navigate from there.
I'll second Rachel's motion.
Thank you, Joe. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? All abstained? Thank you. Everybody take a quick second before we all drop off. Make sure you have your link. Okay, see you on the other side. Both Dan and Bob had to split. So, and then there were 10.
I believe Rachel had to leave too, right?
No, there were 9. Did we have, okay, and then, but Dan said that he votes to approve the thing that you're about to talk about. I don't think that counts, but well, I suppose me selling it.
But we still have a quorum, so we can.
Okay, cool. That was where my next question was. All right, let's get started then. Graham, go ahead.
So thanks. Sorry for the late notice on this, but there were some last minute negotiations to get this all finalized. My email I sent out to you yesterday. We have 3 actually engineering contracts with ESC Engineering to do a lot of design type work and stuff on some of our larger capital projects. And so for a long time, we've relied on sort of a modified version of the standard RUS contract. As I think you guys all saw, it's sort of that contract with a lot of red lines through it to omit inapplicable materials. But they also had their own sort of terms and conditions on that. I went over with them where I felt that their terms and conditions were inconsistent with the RUS contract, and so they've agreed to sort of modify that. So the agreement should be internally consistent, and our RUS contract controls over their terms and conditions. So because of the size of these contracts, board policy requires that they be reviewed and approved by the board. So bringing all 3 contracts to you. If you have any questions, be happy to field them. Ted?
Yeah, I go ahead and move to approve the 3 contracts, -14, -15, and -16 as presented.
Thank you. Can we get a second? Anyone?
Kohler, second.
There we go. All right, Kohler. Okay, any discussion?
Sorry.
Joe, go ahead, please.
I just wondered, these are big deals. I just wonder, were there any real surprises as this was being negotiated? I know this has pretty substantial impact on our budget. Just wondering if it all went smooth and figuring out what has to be done.
I think this is all in line with our sort of long-term capital projects, correct, Carl? Yeah, there weren't any surprises here, and it's largely sort of it's engineering type work and stuff. It's not like there's gonna like materials costs were gonna impact this or anything. It's not like all of a sudden there was a big cost shift with some of our materials inflation and stuff like that. So
I very much agreed, Graham.
Okay, Tim, go ahead.
So these are additional contracts for, or contracts for additional work, or new contracts. It's being brought to the board because of it's in excess of a limit for the CEO, I guess. And yet there is redrafting of the contract. So I have not had time to read these. I feel uncomfortable approving or disapproving something I haven't had time to read. So I'm just seeking clarification on how different this is from anything that we might have approved in a similar type of contract previously.
It's minimally different. It's there is some choice of venue clauses about where litigation is supposed to occur when there's a contract dispute, and trying to remember what the other one was. It's just sort of they have some sort of terms and conditions. If you see each of the overall process, we have sort of our contract, that's the RUS contract, and then they have some terms and conditions, and I just wanted to make sure some of the administrative terms and conditions aligned with each other, that they were internally consistent. I mean, frankly, it's stuff that you kind of anticipate will never come up, but it's my job as the lawyer to sort of make sure we've clarified those details.
Oh, well. Frustrating. My internet froze again. All right, thank you.
Do you need me to repeat my answer? Were you able to hear it?
I think what you were saying is they are not substantially different than what we approved before in terms of the conditions within the contract. And the biggest impact is it sounds like we're approving 3 large value contracts that are budgeted for. These are not X budget. All right, thanks. That's good. That's what I need to know.
Sue, go ahead.
Thanks. I guess I'm a little still confused. Well, first of all, I'll back up and say I didn't like getting this like last minute. So I too have concerns about going ahead and approving stuff that I've not really had a chance to look at. Are these new contracts or are these increases to existing contracts that we have?
These are new projects that we have scheduled, right? So sort of the order of the schedule on our capital projects, right, is we have sort of the design and engineering and then a right-of-way phase, and then we move into construction. And so this is sort of so we're just starting to sort of roll out these capital projects. So because we have sort of multiple entities that work on a capital project, we run this trying to think about how to say it. So these are basically updated versions for new projects that are getting ready to get started.
So Graham, are you saying that this is already work we've contracted for with this contractor in our capital plan? This is just the same work that they've done. So the board has reviewed these exact same contracts for the same type of work. It's just that Graham wanted to update the language such that he felt comfortable with an updated contract. Is that correct?
Yeah, so they do this exact same work for us on a regular basis and have for a long time. There's nothing sort of materially different in the work that they're providing. So this is just sort of like basically kind of a project line item for them to bill against as they do work on new project.
So
is that right, Carl? Sort of, yeah.
So is time of the essence in approving this today, or can this wait for us to actually have a chance to look at this and approve it next month?
You know, I think we wanted to keep the ball rolling on that was sort of.
So
staff's-
Graham, so Sue, it's a good question because I asked the same thing. Why are we rushing on this? And what I understand from Carl and Dan, you guys need to jump in, is that we could wait another month. However, we're going to lose out on pricing and contract. So it will increase our costs if we wait another month.
That's correct.
And we did felt that this one which should not have been a big issue for the board, because the board has already approved all past contracts for this exact same work with this exact same vendor. We just needed to update the language in the contract to whatever Graham needed to make sure that our risk was reduced.
Yeah, I mean, sort of on the timing on that, Sue, this is, I mean, I will have a mea culpa on this, right? What happened was they came to us with these contracts because we've never sort of modified them in the past. And so, as is my job, I sat down and kind of read through them all, and I was like, oh, you know, I would like this to be a little different and this to be a little different, and some minor tweaks to make it sort of internally consistent. And so, you know, that really wound up with a little back and forth between me and their corporate representation. And so this was the time that we got it finalized in order to try and keep the workflow moving smoothly. That's why we're here now. You know, if I hadn't had any changes to make, this would have been on the agenda. I just didn't know how long it was going to take them to respond to my comments and if I was going to be satisfied with their response.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Kirsten.
Yeah, so in general on these, I feel that the board does the bulk of their decision-making during the budget process, and I appreciate that. There is a $250,000 limit because it adds a little more risk, and I do appreciate that part of this work was de-risking that contract, Graham. So the quick review I was able to do, I'm fine with that contract. I do understand though that there are some board members who may be able to be better readers of contracts and may be able to find some things here. And so that time thing is, the timing, Graham, was a little tough on those folks who may be able to add some value. All saying, I am for approving this. I approved it, looked at the work back at the capital stage and looked at the contract minimally to make sure that it wasn't very much different from our other contracts. Other than that, as a board member, I can't really add any value.
I'm sorry. So was there a request or a question there, or is that a statement?
Oh,
that was a statement.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's what I just want to make sure I heard you correctly. All right. Thank you for that. Joe.
Yeah, just real quick. I started reading the contract, like Kirsten said. There's no value I could add to something like this, and I think we approved the budget, and I just don't think that it's the board's responsibility to start wading into these types of contracts that are clarifications. I think we're very safe with all of this.
Great. Thank you, Joe. I think, let me get my own hand up. Speaking for myself, I think two thoughts on this particular contract. I'm comfortable relying on the representations of the executive team to vote. And I think perhaps, and this is a request to the FACT committee, that you guys revisit the ceiling for what needs to go up to the board. I think it's 250,000 now. I think it's long overdue for an increase, but that's for a decision for the FAC. But my personal recommendation is that you guys revisit that and considering a significant increase there. Thank you. And that was a statement, not a question. Okay, anybody else? Okay. Great. Then all in favor, please hold your hand up and say aye.
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 Thank you. All opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, motion passes. Go do that contract. And that was, there are no, I'm sorry, I should have said it before. There were no actions coming out of executive session. So returning now to section 8, we were having a conversation about tri-state, and Kirsten, you had the floor when we had to put a pin in it.
Yes, sir. Thank you. How's my volume? My mic's kind of.
You're good.
Okay, super. So I wanted to first do a comment on Holly's before I get into my specific questions. And, you know, Holly, you were talking about cultural change in order to get demand resource and this kind of whole concept of how can we make this a win-win. And I think with a lot of as with a lot of things, it's not going to be a cultural change as much as it's going to be an economic change. And where we need to make that economic case is with each of those co-ops, to have them understand that if we can take a little bit from everybody, or or just some big hunks from some folks, we can bring down that summertime peak. And I want to touch on that a little bit when I get to my report. So I think that's how you change culture, is you change the economics, and the economics are really powerful for this. So before I go on to my questions, what do you got, Holly? I'm sorry.
Yeah, no problem. And yeah, I agree with you. And so when I was like developing my whole hypothesis of risk, you know, that's what I boiled it down to, was risk. What are we risking by having this governance challenge, right? And that's something that a lot of them are not ready to address because they're so entrenched. So like, for instance, a risk that they already have facing them is activist groups, right? A lot of them don't realize that's a risk of not changing and of not listening to the people, or not having contact with the people. Stranded assets, you're going to continue to make bad decisions in the realm of where to invest your money if you don't have the wider educational or skill set abilities to listen, you know, to objectively understand the information sources that are in front of you, or that you understand what the people need or want themselves, right? So stranded assets are a big one. The activist groups, there's a wide variety of different risks that come from this. And one of them right now is dragging our heels on, you know, moving towards what we are kind of moving towards, the utility of the future, right? A lot of them in the first place will not admit to you that they think, you know, they'll say, oh, climate change is happening, but they don't connect it with, and you know, the human activity involved in the system, and that's a problem. So, I mean, there's a lot of challenges, and I'm trying to figure out how to relate this to risk overall. You know, because you're right, it does come down to economics, but they want to make these decisions also in a vacuum, right? And so, for instance, United Power was talking about not being able to get enough liability insurance to be able to cover their transmission lines, you know, in the forest. And I said, well, you know, something about climate change, and that prompted a call from a tri-state board director, and that was his point. We need to make linear decisions, but to me, this does not happen in a vacuum. And I know that I'm kind of going around in circles, but in the long run, the tying together of all of this is a governance challenge that is risk associated with not having the diversity on these boards, but to fully understand what's coming down the pipeline.
Thank you, John. I had some other questions that were not on Holly's topic, but on the tri-state topic, if I may.
Yes. So are you good, Holly?
I'm sorry.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I would love to be able to talk to somebody about all of this and how to tie it together in a cohesive format, because that's how I see it. you know, and that's one of the very points of having diversity on the boards in the first place, is to challenge the status quo and the known facts, right? There are only known facts if everybody all, you know, have somebody on the board that's like, hey, did you think about it this way? Or offers a new fresh perspective. Because one of the things that I found on a lot of these boards of directors is they become intergenerational positions. Like, you know, grandpa and then dad and then son all hold these positions. So that's one big challenge. It's also coupled with the fact that some of these folks have been on their boards 30, 40 years. You know, when I was at the summer school.
Actually, I'm gonna jump in here. If you should direct your questions and comments to Kohler, he's providing a director report. So if you're asking him for an action or feedback, or you remark on his director, please let's just tighten your comments down to that particular subject. Sorry.
I know it's a lot to handle, John. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. I want to give you the forum to do it, but this is the subject that we're on.
Well, Kirsten, I guess we're ready for your questions.
Okay, yes, sir. And
Yes.
Yeah, let's find that forum for Holly's topic. So it's because it's a good thing. So
absolutely.
Yeah, good, thanks. So for my tri-state questions, Kohler, can you tell us anything about that special board meeting on June 30th and the time sensitive matter?
Yeah, it was time sensitive. It was a contract with the developer for a proposed development that was going to happen. And the deal was on the time and the price. I can tell you that the time was extended from 2023 to 2024 to get this project going. I cannot talk about price.
Okay, yeah,
it was
that makes sense.
Contract negotiation, and that's why it was executive session, the whole thing, and a special meeting because it was date sensitive.
Okay. And on page 79 of the entire report, I don't know what page of your report, the renewable generation accounted for 36% of total power supply and 41% of member load. And so
the 41%.
Okay. I'm ready.
So the 41%, that includes all generation. So that includes market sales, and it also includes line loss. When you go to just the renewables for the members, that's only taking the generation that is used for the members. They do not sell renewable energy on the market. They sell their other energy. So what happens is you're changing the denominator from the whole thing in the first case, if that's your thing. And then the second case, now you're doing just the members amount of the total generation. So obviously the percent gets higher.
I see. So
Does that make sense the way I put that?
Okay. So this doesn't have anything to do with the fact that, you know, so we're doing our 5% and we use our 5%. So doesn't our 5% also count in the member load, but not in the total power supply?
No, it would be in both. It'd be in the total power supply as far as renewable, and it's also in the members' use.
Okay, so it's just the denominator. Okay, sorry.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. And those are my tri-state questions. Thank you.
I don't see any other hands. So John, I'm going to turn it back to you.
Great, thank you. Okay, fast track. Who's driving? Tim, Ted?
Yeah, I'm the rep. I think it's my report. So
great.
Happy to take questions if you still have more questions of fast track regarding fast track. It was a fairly brief meeting in terms of non-executive session topics. So feel free to ask any questions based on that report. Kirsten, I guess you have your hand up.
Yes, I do. Tim, just a quick explanation for me of looks like the sale and rebuy of marketable securities. At first, I thought it was a one-time write-off, but then I see it got rebought. Page 89.
shoot, I'm sorry, this thing keeps. What? I'm not understanding your question.
Oh, okay, on page 89, and sorry, let me get page 89 in front of me.
89.
I can't get page 89 in front of me. Let me go here. I'm looking at my notes that I had sent out, and apparently they weren't, I get that they weren't clear enough. So page 89, go. No. No, I can't get to it. In it, and there's also some discussion of it when you talk about the sale of marketable securities, and in it you'll see that there was a sale of 152,000, and then there was an investment in that, and then there were proceeds from a sale of 155,000.
All right, so there are some of the funds that cash funds, cash equivalents that FASTTRACK has are invested in certificates of deposit that are laddered. So on a periodic basis, they're sold and then reinvested, hopefully at a higher interest rate. So I believe that's what that's pointing out.
Okay, okay. Thank you, sir.
Sure. Any other questions? Any other comments? Ted, go for it.
Yeah, I just wanted to take the opportunity to point out that, what I consider for FASTTRACK a pretty big win in terms of really having to go to bat and argue. Correct me if I get any of it wrong, Tim, based on your understanding, but basically Colorado Broadband Board initially rejected our grant application for bringing fiber to the home in Ignacio, and based on some kind of technicalities, but basically, they said no way because they're already served, but in reality they were underserved, and FASTTRACK along with some other partners went and argued that point and won, and then were subsequently granted awarded that grant application. So kudos to the staff of FASTTRACK for sticking to it and getting it done. And it's a big number. It's a very big grant. So it's a good step for FASTTRACK.
Thanks, Ted. Good clarification. Anyone else? Any other? Guess we're finished here. Thanks.
Okay. Thanks, Tim. Pushing on to CREA.
Hey, thanks. I think I've already pretty much said enough at this point, but I would encourage you, if you are in town. I did receive Kohler and Sue and Joe your acknowledgement that you won't be in town and won't be able to attend that meeting. The reason why I really was kind of encouraging y'all to attend it was they weren't going to allow any other attendees to come. I pushed the point because I end up getting quite a bit of information from those, and the executive committee did decide to allow you all to come in. So you're more than welcome to. That's on Tuesday afternoon. And of course, Wednesday morning, they will have the regular board meeting. So if anybody has any feedback about CREA, I'm more than willing to take your comments or suggestions or questions or whatever, because they are asking about which direction CREA should be going in. But it's important to us what does not seem as effective. And I know as your board representative that, a lot of the stuff I have to do my best to analyze, but if you guys have anything in particular, please let me know. I guess that's about it. Anything else? Anybody questions?
Hey,
See, I've
Holly.
overwhelmed you again.
Tim, did you have a comment? Go ahead.
Yeah, I noticed in your legislative legal regulatory report the note that Polis vetoed a bill that would put EV chargers in new construction applications, and it was a surprise to me. I wasn't aware of that. So just curious if anyone gave an explanation of why that was vetoed. Any insight into that?
Yeah, quite honestly, sir, I was a little surprised by that as well and a little disheartened. However, I think what the official, like what CREA staff mentioned was Polis was concerned about this impact specifically to the construction community. And, you know, it was kind of a disappointing answer. So I could look back through my notes and see if I have anything more specific written down, but that's kind of the gist of it.
All right, well, thanks. I liked your reporting back on what happens legislatively and stuff. And this past session, this past year has been great. So really,
yeah, I do. Thank you, Tim. I do appreciate that. And, you know, I really want to give a kudos out to the Craig Johnson, who's the new attorney at CREA, because he does a pretty extensive legal and regulatory report that I send to you whenever I get them. They are pretty informative, though.
Yeah, helpful, very helpful. Thanks.
Tim, I'd offer this to the board. I've located Governor Polis's statement. He issued a public statement on why he vetoed it. If the board is interested, I'll forward it to everyone. If you're not interested, don't look at it, but you know, I'll go ahead and forward it.
I'm interested.
Thank
Thanks,
you,
Graham.
Okay.
All right, any other questions? All right, well, I really appreciate having the opportunity to serve my communities and serve with you all and serve on CREA. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. All right, Western United.
Western United did not have a meeting. The next one is the end of August, so I'll be reporting in September on that. It'll be my first meeting of attendance. The only thing I'd like to add to that, since maybe if I put a comma in there instead of a period, my briefing from Jerry, Garrett, and Jessica and Elizabeth on our fire science was very informative to me. And when Jerry said earlier today, you know, that'll be out in front of the board for us, very comprehensive plan on actions that we're taking. And I think it reinforced the statement that I hear when people say, yeah, we want to make sure we have some wildfire money to take action on stuff. I believe this is going to be a sound document for us to move forward on. A lot of times we work in the, you know, we want to eliminate all the risks, and you can't do that in the wildland fire environment. But the plan that they have, very comprehensive for us. And so I look forward to that final publication. Nothing.
Thank you. All right, and you are up, Kirsten, Tri-State Rate Design Committee.
Yes, super. My report starts on page 993, 193. I just want to do a couple highlights. So the revenue requirement does take into account that generation cost is going to go up 47 million. I wouldn't be surprised, based upon what you were saying, Kohler, about the inflation thing, that changes even more. The way we're able to keep the revenue requirement with the same was to drop the stabilization fund and to lower the margin. So it just kind of counters what expected increased costs were going to be, and that just might overwhelm it. So we may actually have to come up with a higher revenue requirement. We had to pick a point of time of what we were going to do that on, using the 2022 budget, which was available and also had been well documented, was the thing to do. And then we just been kind of upping and downing from there to figure out how much money we need to bring in. Questions on that piece? Tim? Separate piece.
All right, thanks. I do like your reports here, Kirsten. They're helpful. And that revenue requirement note that you made, that's looking forward, right? That's like what you're trying to anticipate. And I forget the time horizon, but is it 5 years, something like that? Or
It's actually for 20, September of 2023.
23.
So
Okay. So just a year away or so.
Right, right.
And when you say rate stabilization fund is eliminated, I think of that as a balance sheet item. So I'm not sure how I'm not sure how that's working in this. You're talking about a rate, which would be expense. Is this the contribution to that or something? I'm not quite sure how.
Well, two things. There will be no further contribution to it. And secondarily, we're gonna eat it down. So it's not gonna be, so the whole idea of a rate stabilization fund is to keep the rate stable, right? Well, there's gonna be enough need for it that it's gonna get eaten up. So it will no longer be on the balance sheet because we're gonna be having to put that money in so that we're not charging.
So they're gonna stop contribution and run it down in order to keep rates lower. It sounds like a recipe for a problem later. Just curious, yeah, like punting the thing down the hill. Anyway, just observation.
Yeah, thank you for that observation. Let me mull on that, okay? So then on the cost of service, I don't really have any comments on that unless somebody has any questions for me. What I wanted to spend just a minute on was the system and member load profiles. And this is where I believe we can make an economic argument with our co-ops. So overall, Tri-State is a summer peaker. At the last rate committee, at the end, we broke out into sessions and there was not a lot of discussion, but one of the things that Tri-State said that they got out of that was, well, it seems like you guys don't want to do seasonal rates. And afterwards, it occurred to me, well, wait a second, we're losing a big tool if we don't try to do seasonal rates. So I'm preparing something for that committee and for pre of that committee so they can get it beforehand of, guys, did we let this go too fast? Shouldn't we be looking at seasonal rates? If we have a seasonal rates and it's more expensive, then that's going to be more incentive for people to use to be able to avoid demand. And certainly we have that case of we have a bus that you guys could use and try to shave off some of that demand. So that's the case I'm going to be making. Dan has made a really good point to me of it's probably a losing case, but if we're not able to get seasonal rates, then we need to say, all right, if we do a year-round rate, then we need to build programs that are win-wins and really accept those programs instead of saying, well, gosh, LPEA benefits from that, but the rest of us don't, when indeed the rest of us do, because we're able to shave those peaks. And you can see that. I mean, that summertime peak, all that, anything above 2,000 megawatts that's summertime. That's just plain old summertime. Any questions on that? And I believe that's it. Thanks, John.
You are welcome, and thank you for doing that. Okay, that is the July board meeting. Absent any closing comments.
Hey, John, I just I went to the farmer's market a couple weeks ago, and it was interesting. I didn't have no one like tried to assault me or throw stuff or complain about rates being too high. People complained about their bills individually, but overall it was very positive, and people were very complimentary about, notifications and roundup and everything. There was a few off the wall questions, and I referred them to staff, so I'm trusting that they called. But it was a worthwhile experience. I'm glad I did it. So
not being assaulted at the farmer's market is called winning, Joe. Winning. Just say it.
Tomatoes weren't ripe yet, so I guess that was
okay. All right. Well, thank you again for everybody's contribution here, and this meeting is adjourned.
Great, thank you. Bye,
Thank
everybody.
you.
Be safe. See you guys next week at the CREA stuff.